Good afternoon, everyone. This is Naishad Gadani coming to you from Melbourne. And today is a 216th episode of Career Care Package. As we like to, as probably I like to call this as one of the longest LinkedIn live show running, and Guinness Book should take a notice of that very soon. And in our effort to bring real interesting perspectives and ideas on this platform, we are so delighted to welcome Erin Devlin here today. And Erin's book, which is How to Get the Job You Really Want, is running for an Australian Career Book of the Year award. And we are delighted to have her. She is a recruitment veteran. So, all those people who always felt that why the hell recruiters don't answer my phone calls or emails, this is your chance. Get out
They
and
should.
ask questions to Erin, because we would love to find out more about how COVID has changed labor market, how people are approaching, and what are her top tips on how job seekers should approach the job market right now. But before we start to talk to Erin, let's welcome Caroline Brown.
Thanks, Nation. It's absolutely fantastic to be here. And I think you forgot to mention that Erin is an award-winning recruiter, RCSA Recruiter of the Year award. Is that correct, Erin?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic. So, today we want to talk about, I guess, the job market's been so up and down. Everybody was really, I guess, devastated during lockdowns, and then there was a big bounce back, and now Sydney's into lockdown, and I imagine it's sort of going up and down. So fantastic to have you here and get your insights and also explore your book.
Sure. Yeah, happy to help. It's definitely been a little bit of an up and down job market. I know in Victoria we experienced what Sydney is experiencing now, which is typically what we see is a drop off in temp and contract positions around this time if you're in a lockdown, particularly if it looks to be an extended lockdown. We also see positions drop away that are customer facing, your reception administration, obviously broader hospitality, customer service type positions, retail. But as restrictions ease, obviously those sorts of roles start to come back. So post lockdown in Victoria last year, what we saw was a very sudden and encouraging snapback in the jobs market. So we actually have a graph in our latest people-to-people market report, which shows the GFC, and the GFC sort of went like this. There's a bit of a curve. I don't know if you can see that. COVID did this straight away. And then that was nationally. So what I would expect with lockdown in Sydney is that we would definitely see a bit of a tapering of jobs, and that's job vacancies, the graph that I referred to before. So we definitely see that drop off, but you'll see it rebound very, very quickly out of lockdown. So not very helpful right now if you're in Sydney and trying to find a role, because hiring activity will have reduced for sure, but definitely encouraging for when we do go out of lockdown. It's not a slow recovery typically, it's a quick snapback. Victoria, on the other hand, is still going strong. I think confidence down here is still quite high, even though we've had lockdown after lockdown. Confidence is a lot higher that we're going to get out of it quickly, and businesses just sort of used to it now, so we're just sort of getting on with it in office settings. Companies are used to hiring virtually. They're no longer putting inductions off. They're happy to do it virtually. So it's business as usual down here in Victoria in the job market.
It's fantastic that you say that, because I remember the first time around it was like, oh my God, what's at the other side? But now there's sort of like being the in and out, you kind of know. So I'd love to have a chat with you around the book. So getting the job that you really want, because I think you can focus on the short term, and people do, but it's also a good time to really reflect and evaluate what it is that you want to do. So tell us about what prompted you to write the book.
Yeah, so we, during COVID, we saw a lot of job seekers and candidates that I think compromised a little bit just for necessity. You know, people were trying to get food on the table, get their bills paid. And so we saw candidates really broaden what they were open to, and perhaps compromise on things like salary and environment, and work for employers that, you know, maybe they wouldn't work for in a good time. And I really like to think that everybody deserves to have not just a job, but a great job. So I really wanted to inspire people to take a step back, look at what's important to them, look at what they actually do want in their life and career, and then help people get into the very best position that they can to get that job. Because it is possible to get our job, but to get the best jobs out there, you really do need to know how to get the edge in your job search. And there are a lot of nuances and specific tips and tricks that you can follow that sometimes are about understanding how to work with AI. Sometimes it's about understanding, you know, how technology searches keywords. And sometimes it's about how you perform in interviews. So knowing all of that, I wanted to give candidates the very best opportunity. And that's why I wrote the book, is to put it all on paper and then really empower people to take it into their own hands from there.
Nish?
Yeah, no, I think we've just got, 3 questions. We'll probably start with first one. Tell us, obviously there is a, a big, kind of, discussion around how much time does a recruiter take to review a CV, right? And there are people who say from 3 seconds to 30 seconds. And, it can be not only confusing, but it could be intimidating for somebody, right? That I spent 2 hours, I remember I spent once 8 hours to develop a resume, cover letter, and selection criteria, and I got knocked back. I said, hang on, I needed a bit more response than just the standard one, but that's a
Yeah.
different story altogether. But tell me about the new recruitment kind of in the application tracking system, and do you
Yes.
really spend only 6 seconds if you had to look at, or it's a myth?
I've got actual data on that, Nish. So I mean, we've got to look at the context. So the context is there might be hundreds of applications for the one role. We might actually have to fill that job today. Sometimes there's, a month to do it. But the reality is when clients contact us, they need that position filled quickly. There's usually a burning hole in their team. Someone's carrying the slack with workload and they expect quick turnarounds. So there's a piece of advice before I answer your question, and that is get in very early with your application. Don't wait till the closing date. Don't wait a few days, even if you can avoid it. Do it that night, get your CV in nice and early, because if you're one of 10 applicants on the list on the first day, that's much better than being one of 200 applications by the third day. So that's really helpful. The actual data, so Career did a survey around this, not just recruiters, it was actually a survey of employers. So employers on average of hundreds of thousands of responses spent, actually measured it on people's computers, they spent 8.8 seconds.
Wow.
So that's the actual data. So it is scary, but the best advice I can give there is to have the most important information front and center on the first page of your CV, right up the top. Don't have it buried in the back. What we often see is that candidates can perhaps assume that a person will read the CV from front to back and actually read it word for word. They won't. They will, unfortunately, as far as time permits, they will typically do a quick skim read to see what keywords are popping out, have a look at the current role or most recent job, qualifications, key systems industries and certifications, and that's kind of the first hurdle. If you get past the 8.8 second hurdle, then they'll look at it for a lot longer, obviously, but they might be looking for three base criteria, for example, and if they're not present, then they're going to potentially move on quite quickly. It's a harsh thing to say, but it's just what the data says, and it's the reality of the volume of interest that you can sometimes get with jobs.
I think some fantastic tips in there because, people tend to, in CVs put their whole life history and not build it specifically for the job. But also, I think people forget that recruiters don't have to, in the private sector, don't have to read all the CVs. So, it might be the best of the first 10 that you get that you push forward into whatever role you're trying to fill, if it's a time-based role as well. So we've got another... sorry.
I was just going to say, Carolyn, in terms of, I know that if I'm recruiting a role, and I know this is the same for my team, I can't speak for all recruiters, but I can speak for people to people. We definitely review every application that comes in at the point that job is still in play. So what I mean by that is the job advertisement may still be live, but we might have an offer and acceptance on the role, but we're waiting for the contract to come. Someone might apply, and we'll still keep across those applications. But once an offer and acceptance is made, we can't renege that offer. It's a legally binding verbal contract. So you actually do often get people apply once that's happened. You've still got your ad live, because unless the contract's signed, it can be reversed essentially. And so that might be where you apply and then maybe get knocked back at that point. But we would still flag any quality candidates who are at the same level as the candidate we've offered. So nobody gets missed, but sometimes timing is very important.
Absolutely, it makes perfect sense. Got another question. I think this is one of the questions that we sent you to discuss as well, or along the same line, is how do you build a relationship with somebody like you or your team? Because, you are in that busy environment, you do get hundreds of applicants. How do you actually leave a positive impression, build a relationship and have that move forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it depends on where you are in the market and whether you're in a niche sector. And that's my honest answer, is that recruitment consultants typically have niche markets that they work within. And some of those niche markets are undersupplied and some of them are oversupplied. So at the moment, if you're a receptionist and you're immediately available in Melbourne and you're a good receptionist, 100% our team would want to hear from you. And we want to hear from anybody, but the reality is that if we had a great receptionist right now, because a lot of people have moved out of reception into other work because they're sick of getting put in lockdown and having that risk, it makes it an in-demand role right now. Pre-COVID, not so much, but it makes it an in-demand role. If you are currently, say, in perhaps a generic administration role or a generic customer service role, that market is more oversupplied. So we have a lot more candidates applying. There are less jobs for more people. So, in answer to your question, if you're in a really niche market, let's say you've got a really technical specific skill within technology, for example, or you are an accounting graduate with a particular software package that is hard to find, that can be very, very in demand. But if your skill set is a little bit more generic, or you're using mainstream software packages, there might be a lot of other candidates like you. So the best way to build a relationship is to firstly to submit your CV before you call. Submit your CV, then call, have a phone conversation so that the recruiter actually registers the conversation with you, gets an understanding of what you're looking for. They will make notes on that so that when we have jobs come up, they'll have a look at those notes to see. If there is a job for you, or if you're in a niche area, they might invite you in for interview ahead of roles. If they think, okay, you've got a really in-demand skill set, we'll definitely meet with you now, because we know there'd be 5 or 6 employers that would want to meet with you. So that may happen, and then your recruiter should actually stay in touch with you, regularly after that. But you're welcome to give them a call, I'd say once every 4 to 6 weeks, just to check in and see where things are at. If you're in a more oversupplied market, you may not get registered straight away. You may not be invited in for interviews straight away, but it's okay to give the recruiter a call, maybe again every 4 to 6 weeks, just to say, hey, I'm still available. This is what I'm looking for. Would love to be kept in mind. Thanks so much for your time.
It's really interesting that perhaps the underlying message there too is to try and work out what makes you available, like makes you unique and in demand, and keep working on those skills as well.
Yes.
Along the way. What else have we got for questions? This is from Shahalina again. How recruiters think about a candidate when they call them? I guess when you're doing a telephone screening, for example, what are some of the things that you're following up on somebody that submitted their CV? What are some of the things that you're looking for in that call?
Yeah, great question, Carolyn. And this is important for your CV and the call.
Mm.
And if you're doing a proactive phone call into the recruiter, you want to have your elevator pitch ready. These are the things that matter in the elevator pitch. Your skill set. So what's your key area? Is it accounting? Is it technology? Are you a web developer? What's your skill? Any key systems you've used and industries you've worked in. So you might call in and say, hi, Erin, I am a payroll manager. I've worked with Chris 21 and I've worked in healthcare. Those three things, I'm interested straight away because I know they're really hard to find.
Write that down.
Straight away. If you call me and say that, you're coming, you're welcome to come in for an interview. So you've got to get your elevator pitch ready, and it is your skill set, your industries, and systems that are the most important straight up. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because that's what I think. Dropping keywords is very important. Sometimes it appears to be not a full sentence, but in our conversations also we are looking for keywords and nudges that, oh, got it, now I'm interested. I think figuring out 3 points as Erin says, and constructing some sentences around that. But one of the things that I always tell, and would love to get your feedback on that, Erin, is that confidence to communicate with recruiters is essential on the phone specifically, because on the you got to sound more like that you are credible and you've got authority on this, rather
Mm-hmm.
than I say this all the time, that an average job seeker is less confident than somebody who sells drugs. Somebody who sells drugs is far more confident, by the way, right? Than somebody, because job seekers have got something to offer, something genuine to offer, and they get paid for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
have you been approached by somebody who's in a more creative way? I would love to hear that. If you found that someone
Not
approached in a
offering
creative
drugs
way.
though, Nish.
No, hopefully not. I agree with what you say there. I think confidence is really important, and also to be concise. We're just people on the other end of the phone. If you meet any of my team here, they're lovely people, really, really lovely people. And they always remember we're working with people. We're not going on autopilot. We're not, doesn't matter how many years you've worked in recruitment, we're still working with people and people's lives. And I remind our team of that I don't have to remind our team, but it's something that I like to say a lot. Is it's one of the biggest decisions people make in their life after buying a house and maybe choosing a life partner. It's really important having a great job. So I do think confidence is important. Being concise is important. Remembering that just having a nice chit-chatty conversation is probably not that helpful. We do want to build rapport with you, but give us those key things straight up. I'm a law, litigation secretary. I've used Adderant. I've worked in the industry 5 years. Love to work for a mid to top tier law firm. That's a great elevator pitch. So just keeping it really concise. In terms of creative ways to stand out, so I've got a section in my book, and there's actually I've got it here. Sorry, I'll hold it up. There. I feel a bit silly when I do that, but I've got a script in this book actually, which is for how to create a video cover letter. So what I mean by that, it's not as fancy as it sounds. It's actually just a less than 60-second video that you can submit along with your job application. And it really is that elevator pitch, piece to camera, elevator pitch. And that is so helpful because we can just play that video. We can meet you briefly in less than 60 seconds. And I guarantee you'll get much more than 8.8 seconds if you submit a video. And because I genuinely think that will be the norm in about 2 to 3 years' time. That will 100% be the norm. You submit a less than 60-second video with your job application. It happens now. A lot of recruiters use, we have a video interviewing platform that does interview candidates, but we only do that for volume campaigns. But imagine if you did that for any job. How much would that make you stand out? Massively. So highly recommend it.
I think you're probably more memorable and more human, and you can see somebody's personality, and we're very visual. So if we see somebody in a suit, we believe that they're, I don't know, a manager, or do you know what I mean? So it's those quick things that just take that split second to actually get where somebody's coming from as well. So Naisha's popped a link to buy your book in the comments. So hopefully you'll get hundreds of people. Another question around interviews, because I know that, sometimes when clients are using recruitment consultants, there's the screen that you do, and then you get people in and you have another conversation, then you make a decision perhaps about whether to refer them along to a client. So what are some of the good things and bad things you see in those, interviews with you guys?
Yeah, the good thing we see is great preparation. So I had a journalist the other day ask me, not sure whether it was a positioning question, but, she said, is confidence the most important thing in interviews? And I said, confidence is good, but preparation is better because preparation is the most important thing. So I've got 2 whole chapters on that in here, because it's about thinking about all the questions that you might be asked in the interview, preparing responses to those, having a bit of a practice of that, and then just relaxing on the day. I do liken it to in a previous life. I don't know if you know this, but in a previous life I was a professional ballerina with the Australian Ballet. So I used to rehearse my, if I had a big solo coming up or a pas de deux, I would rehearse it 3 times in a row, over and over again. And I would rehearse it until I could do it 3 times in a row perfectly, so that when I would go out on stage, I could just relax, because I only had to do it once. That was easy. It's the same with an interview. You want to prepare some of those key responses. You know what you're going to get asked. You're going to get asked some really, really common interview questions. And then there'll be some quirky ones. There'll be some left of center ones. So just try and think creatively. But do that preparation before you go in. The other thing is, sometimes we can go into an interview and it wouldn't happen here because our interviewers are trained really well, but you might meet with an employer. They're not used to interviewing. Maybe they haven't been trained how to interview, and they don't use any behavioural-based questioning or any sort of STAR-based questioning. So STAR questioning is situation, task, action, result. And what you can do in your preparation is actually prepare STAR responses that you can use to non-STAR questions. So the interviewer might say to you, for example, in this role, you're going to be managing a lot of projects. What are you going to do to make sure you manage projects well? So you could answer that question by saying, I would do this and I would do that. It's not that powerful. You can answer the question, but you need to use an example to make it you can use an example to make it even more effective. So a STAR way to answer that might be to say, managing projects in this role is obviously really important. I would make sure that I do X, Y, Z. As an example, when I managed XYZ project in my previous role, what we did was this, then this. This is the outcome. Everybody was happy. So you're using an example by using the STAR method to prepare. There's a lot of things that you can do to prepare ahead of an interview so that you go in really confident.
What are some of the things that drive you nuts with candidates in interviews? Like, what do you wish they wouldn't do? Or is there a list as long as your arm?
Look, I honestly, I've worked in recruitment 15 years, and I always see the human side of recruitment. And we all, you have to remember that for us, we meet, thousands of people a year, but for them, it might be the first time they've had an interview ever. So we don't expect, that people are going to be always that polished. And sometimes that's part of our role is to, when they come in, they interview with us, is we say, would you mind if I give you some feedback? And then we can actually give you some tips that really help them to prepare and present well to the client or to our client that they're going to be interviewing with. In terms of things that drive me nuts, it's not much phases me these days. I'm pretty easygoing and open-minded. I've met a lot of people from a lot of walks of life, so I'm very, very open-minded. But it is worth noting that in the writing of this book, I looked at a whole lot of research, and one of the things that we did pick up, and I can't think of the reference right off the top of my head, but I know that it was around, there was a huge study done by Adzuna, actually, and they looked at, they spell checked hundreds of thousands of CVs, and what they found is that I think it was something like 60% of CVs had at least one or more spelling mistakes, and something like 50% had at least 4. So I would say, even if you think you've got your CV immaculate, perfect, just run it by a couple of other people so that they can have a fresh set of eyes on it. In terms of, there's really nothing else that drives me nuts, but in terms of, what not to do, highly recommend, get to your interview 10 minutes before, no earlier, no later. Early is a little bit too eager, and it might not fit in with the schedule of the person. Later can be a bit risky if you can't find the venue. Get to the area early, go and have a coffee somewhere or a bite to eat, then come up for your interview. But I think preparation is just, definitely the most important thing with interviews, for sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah. If I can, ask, because you'll come across with many people with gaps in their employment, right? Due to caring responsibility, due to injury, due to traveling, everything else. And I think that's one of the most scary part for job seekers.
Sure.
Me and Caroline come across with them often, and I'm pretty sure you would have too. How do you want them to approach their situation with recruiters? My belief is that you don't hide your situation from your lawyer, accountant, or your recruiter. Tell them what's there, right? At the same time, they are running at a risk. The recruiter will say, oh, you know what, I've got 3 candidates, these 2 looks perfect, one of them will get a job, this person, I'm not too sure. So are they, how, because there's a risk, the inherent risk associated with it, how do you want the job seekers to approach that with recruiters?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think the best way to approach it is to look at what, actually communicate what you have done during the break if you're comfortable doing that. Your personal information is your personal information, so you only disclose what you're comfortable disclosing. But sometimes if you don't disclose enough, it can look a little bit like you're covering something up. So, I mean, the worst thing might be the recruiter's brain thinks, okay, you've just had a few years in jail, what's the, and that's fine if that's been the case. But just, I guess because you wouldn't discriminate against that, you would assess it on its merit. But I guess what I'm saying is don't leave them wondering if it's something really simple, if you've been renovating your house, or so. What I wouldn't necessarily put is just unemployed in your CV. Just talk about what you have done. So whilst you've been unemployed, have you undertaken a course? Have you taken on some caring responsibilities? Have you, done a renovation? Did you go traveling? If you went traveling, you could even, if you want to strike up a conversation, you could even list where you went traveling to. No one's doing much of that right now, but next year I'm pretty sure people will be. So it's just good to list what you have been doing in that time, because it can actually be an advantage for you. Pre-COVID times, when I see, or even now, but when I see someone that has been traveling, that's actually really, it adds to their application, because I think, oh, great, you've explored some places, you've got a bit of life experience, you've had to problem solve, work out logistics. So all of that's really valuable. And it humanizes you as well. So if you're happy to share it, it's good to share it. I do get the question, what about if you're coming back from maternity leave, those sorts of things? Again, you just need to use your judgment a little bit in the situation. If you think that the recruiter and or employer would be understanding of that, hopefully most employers are really understanding these days. But really, it's just about disclosing what you feel comfortable disclosing, and it doesn't leave as much wonder or mystery, which can sometimes, give you a bit of an off feeling about things if someone's being cagey with you. So I recommend being as open as possible with your recruiter, and then your recruiter can also talk to you about how best to phrase that with the client or employer. Yeah, so a good example would be sometimes we have candidates ask us about flexibility. Now it's really normal, but pre-COVID, employers weren't as open to it. And so we would work out a way to, with the candidate, when the best time was to bring that up and, how we would negotiate that.
Do you think that comes from, like, I know with a lot of people I work with, they have gaps or there's a different direction they want to go into, and I think there's a little bit of embarrassment around it and not really owning that that's a great thing. Do you think that people do struggle, because you have a gap for whatever reason? It might be travel, might be renovating your house, it might be having kids or whatever, but do you think it comes from just being a bit embarrassed about it, that it's not really an acceptable reason not to be, working? Like, is that your thought on that?
I'm not. I mean, I guess it's different for every person, but I'm sure I've definitely seen that before. But I don't think there's any need to be embarrassed about it. I think, if you're open and willing to upskill yourself to catch up with any changes in your industry, or if there've been some advances with skills or technology in your industry, as long as you're open to that, then you'll be fine. I think it's always good if you can do a little bit of upskilling before you go in, or you can even show the recruiter or employer, I've done a bit of research on what's changed in my industry since I've been out of it. I noticed this and this change. I've done a lot of reading around that, and I've also enrolled in a course on X technology, for example. That shows a lot of proactivity as well.
Okay, we've got another question here. Basically, you were saying about ringing after you've submitted your resume, and if users saying if that's the case, there's a lot of calls happening. So at your end, so they're saying in that scenario, what would you present on your CV or your profile that makes somebody really stand out? Like, what makes somebody really stand out from a resume or even a LinkedIn profile, I guess?
Yeah, so I think on your CV, it's going to be your skill set, industries, systems, because often we're looking for specific software packages or specific industries that person has worked in that has really strong nuances. So those can be really, really helpful. In terms of what else can stand out, I think when you deeper into the CV, it's proactive language. So in the book, I talk about how to structure your CV. There's 3 chapters actually on how to structure your CV and do cover letter writing. But in that structuring, let's say you're doing key duties in your CV under a position. You don't want to just use 2-word phrases like accounts payable, accounts receivable, invoicing. That's not very outcome focused. I can read 2 different CVs which are essentially describing the same role, and I can tell who's more proactive based on how they've written it. So an example would be, let's say you're working in a retail shop. You'd have one candidate that might say, dealing with customers, closing the register, moving clothes around. You've got someone else that's saying assisting customers and providing excellent customer service or something like that. Closing the till for the day and reconciling all accounts. So it's more proactive language that you're using, and you're talking about the outcome, because the outcome is providing great customer service. It's not dealing with people. So I can see a big difference in people's CVs and also LinkedIn profiles based on whether the language tells me they've attended their job versus done their job really well and got really great outcomes. Now, the first person might have got really great outcomes in their job, but they just haven't written it that way. So you just need to think about using proactive language in both your CV and your LinkedIn profile, more so your CV, because you don't have as much room on your LinkedIn as to elaborate. There's a whole nother section dedicated to personal branding. So there's a couple of chapters on, there's one on LinkedIn, a couple of chapters on personal branding, and we've gone beyond with LinkedIn. We've gone beyond it just being a static page. You can really harness social media to proactively market yourself in an industry. And Carolyn, I'm really glad you brought that up, because the first thing that a recruiter does, if you get past the 8.8 seconds, is they will go and search you online to see what footprint there is of you online. And having a LinkedIn profile is good, but having an active profile where you're actually showing thought leadership and expertise around your areas of knowledge, that's even more powerful. You can also see their interactions with other people. What are their networks like? How are their interpersonal skills? What sort of communication style do they have? You get a much better feel for that person by having a look at their online profile. And so you can really harness that as a job seeker to position yourself as a subject matter expert. Let's say you're working in, let's use the litigation secretary example again. You can post topics that might be of interest to potential lawyers or HR managers within law to position yourself as a subject matter expert as a litigation secretary. So it's not random, it's quite targeted, and you can like and share people's content based on who you want to interact with for your job search.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people don't pay attention to their LinkedIn profile, and it isn't just about like what you're saying isn't just about the words. It's about how you're showing networking or communication or interpersonal skills in, or even the type of person that you are in terms of sharing and liking and supporting and that type of thing. So, seems like it's a different dynamic that you're looking for there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it depends on the industry, how important it is. For example, if you're applying for a sales position, if I look at your LinkedIn and you have very few connections or limited interaction, I'm thinking, well, have you really harnessed that for yourself? If you come with a huge network of contacts already, that's incredibly valuable for the next employer. If you're a marketing professional, I'm looking at, visuals, the type of content you're sharing, what is your language like in terms of how what is your personality, your identity like online in terms of your content as well. And sometimes we don't see that, we get very stock standard kind of marketing CVs, and we need to see that personality coming through in those visual mediums. There should be a full online portfolio within marketing, for example. Here's some ways to send it. Let's say you're working in technology, for example. The absolute ultimate end of the scale to stand out would be you've got a YouTube channel solving help desk problems. If you're going for help desk jobs, I mean, that is going to be impressive to an employer. But, a good LinkedIn profile, some good interaction online, and sharing of topics that are relevant to your area of expertise, that'll be enough to be, engaging.
Fantastic.
If I can be a devil's advocate here, and if I ask you that, does it also, because in sometimes, let's say, going back to that idea of, a help desk, somebody who's got a YouTube channel, would that be too much overpowering for an employer to that, hang on, this person would probably be sneaking out of opportunity or would be focused on doing something else in next 6 months, or that's just too much for me? I just don't want anybody whose brand or whose reputation online is so huge that I feel intimidated by that, or I feel that this person would is probably destined to do more interesting stuff rather than doing this, and he or she will get bored with that. How do you
Oh,
balance
that's
it? Just
such a great
not
question.
yeah.
would you ever want to work for an employer that wouldn't harness that though? I think the right employer would harness that. If you need to get, there's two things here though, because when I'm working with, I work with a lot of professional athletes on their career, and sometimes there's the immediate need, which is I need to get money in the door, and that's a job, and that's not necessarily your career. And then there's, this is the career I want to have, and sometimes they're not aligned, and that's okay. It's okay to have the job you need now and the job you want to get. So you could do all that planning in the background. So I get your point. If you're pitching for the job you need now, which is just the money in the door, that could be a bit of a concern. But for the real job that you want long term, all of that's amazing. Plus, me, the way I would view somebody in that situation, I would just think, wow, you're amazing. Let's work with you as long as we can until you do go and do that bigger and better thing. I have had someone in exactly that situation. She's now a Paralympic triathlete. She's absolutely amazing, PhD psychology graduate. And I knew when I hired her, I thought she's not going to stay forever. She's going to go off and do amazing things. But I thought if I could just work with her, for 6 months or a year, that'll be enough. And she stayed a few years, and then she went off and did her sport. But what an honor it was to work with her for that time. So I think if that's the problem you've got, that's a good problem to have for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, we've got just a comment. I think 8.8 second was probably more for resume, not for LinkedIn profile. But I'll definitely check out your LinkedIn profile and give you pointers where to improve on. I can't see your name on the stream yet, but I'll as Liam Neeson says, I will hunt you down. But don't worry, I'll find you. I'll find you where you are, and I'll give you the feedback. But look, we are coming to an end, Erin. It's been absolutely fabulous. Thank you very much for joining us. And I think your pointers and suggestions are incredibly valuable for all the job seekers. So thank you again for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. And I'll hold it up one more time. But the book is Get the Job You Really Want, and you can get it at Booktopia. But yeah, I've written it really just to help people, so I hope it does help, and more than happy to join you today. It's been a pleasure.
Fantastic, and we look forward to the next chapter. And yes, please buy Erin's book. It's a labour of love and an intense process to get it all out on the table. So thanks everyone for joining us. Please follow the hashtag Career Care Package. Please follow or subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell notification to find out what's coming up. Naish, what have we got next week?
Yeah, we are going TikTok next week. So we are going to talk about TikTok. TikToks, if you're living under the stone for a while, if you're living in isolation, you don't know, but TikTok is downloaded 230 million times. And we are not talking, there was obviously another side of TikTok which was shown on four corners. We are not going in there. We are talking about TikTok resumes. So TikTok has recently introduced resumes as part of that. So we are talking to an expert who is going to help us develop a TikTok resume and help us, take a deep dive into that. And before that, I assure you that me and Caroline will also do a TikTok resume. I've not told Caroline
never
this is
even
a
been on
challenge for
TikTok.
us. I've not. This is a challenge for Caroline in front of every one of you. So you'll see me and Caroline doing a TikTok resume as well. But again, please mask up if you are still in Melbourne or Victoria, Sydney. We hear you. We feel the pain that you are in. We're sending all the love, your way, and we wish that you get out of the lockdown fairly soon. Again, thank you very much, Erin, and have a
Thank
great
you.
weekend, everyone. We will see you again next Friday. We'll do this again. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.